one. Whereas arteries start off with one and they branch off like they do with tree branches and the trunk. Veins can be superficial, which means close to the skin, or deep. Arteries are sometimes named by location, like the femoral artery, or the organ they supply, like the renal artery. Veins can be named with artery they accompany, but not always, like the carotids and the jugular vein. All right, let's talk about the layers. The layers of the vessels. The most internal layer is the tunica intima, right? Internal intima. Internal coat or layer of flat cobblestone-like cells that form a lining membrane with connective tissue and elastic tissue. The middle one is called what?
Media.
Media. So tunica media, middle layer of visceral muscle, fibrous tissue encircling the vessel with considerable elastic tissue. And then the outer one is called tunica, outer one.
Adventitia.
Yeah, tunica outer one, adventitia, is a layer of connective tissue surrounding the middle coat. This is going to be on the test. Okay? So there might be a description of which layer I'm describing there. You need to tell me if it's the inside, the middle, or the adventitia.
Is it next week?
Test.
Okay?
On this?
You have my test?
No.
There's a
She's like,
test.
It's
It's
a
like a real
test.
test.
No, it's a real test.
Scantron.
It's a real test. Okay, the physiology of circulation. So blood flow refers to the amount of blood that passes through the blood vessel in a given period of time. So it's the amount of blood that passes through the blood vessel in a given period of time. Blood flow is determined by two principles. One is blood pressure, the other one is resistance. So blood flow is dependent on blood pressure and resistance. We all know what blood pressure is, right? Blood pressure is when you put a cuff around your arm, pump up the little bulb, and listen for the heartbeat. Is that blood pressure? Is it a little bit more specific than that? So blood pressure refers to the pressure in the arteries. It is the force of the heartbeat to the resistance of blood flow. Force of the heartbeat to the resistance of blood flow. An increase in heart rate or force will increase blood pressure. You guys know that, right? So when your activity is heavy, your blood pressure does go up. An increase in resistance of blood flow will also increase blood pressure. So we'll talk about resistance here in just a moment. The average pressure is 100. It takes your systolic and diastolic and the average of two together. So when you're reading a blood pressure reading, it's written as systolic over diastolic. What is systolic? What does that mean?
that's when the heart's working.
Contraction, okay? And then diastolic
It's at rest.
is relaxation, okay? So it's written as 120 over 80, or contraction over relaxation in millimeters per what's Hg? Mercury, okay, per mercury. All right. So this is how the left ventricle looks as it empties and begins to pump the blood out. So here we have systolic pressure. When the chamber starts to fill up, pressure starts at about approximately 0, and then as it begins to fill up with blood, the pressure also increases. So the blood fills the left ventricle from the left atrium, pressure begins to build until it reaches maximum systolic pressure, causing the aortic valve to open. And because of the contraction or elasticity, in this case, of the heart, squeezes the blood out with force, so blood pressure is going to remain at 120, ventricle pressure is going to remain at 120, and then as it's squeezing, there will be two pumps as the pressure decreases in the left ventricle, and then back to 0 until it fills up again during the systolic phase. Okay? Makes sense? All right. So resistance then, that's the other characteristic here of blood flow. So resistance refers to the opposition to the blood flow principally as a result of force or friction between blood and the walls of the blood vessels, and viscosity created by the red blood cells and plasma. Resistance is related to these three things. You have blood viscosity, blood vessel length, and blood vessel radius. So these all will contribute to resistance. Viscosity just means the thickness of the blood. So blood viscosity is the ratio of RBCs and solutes to the fluid. So we're talking about the thickness again. Resistance to blood flow is directly proportional to the viscosity of blood. So in other words, the more viscous it is, the more resistance to flow, right? It's directly proportional. So increase in viscosity includes dehydration, right? Because remember, your blood is, what was it, like 90% water?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 90% water. So if you're dehydrated, it becomes more thick, more viscous, causing resistance. Now we're talking about engine oil. It's going to have difficult time moving through the vessel. So dehydration. Polycythemia is the overproduction of blood cells by the marrow. So if you have too much RBCs, it gets too thick. And then also severe burns will cause the blood to also thicken. All of these increasing in viscosity will also increase your blood pressure. And then the opposite. Decrease in viscosity can be caused by anemia and also hemorrhaging, which in turn will decrease your blood pressure. So again, they're directly related. Any questions? Okay. Blood vessel length. Any reasons why I have these pictures up here?
Like a garden hose, like
I'm
a blood
thirsty.
vessel.
I'm really thirsty. So I had this up on my computer, right? And Miss Smith walked by it. She goes, "Mikey, what are you looking at?" It's a water hose. What are you thinking? So blood vessel length. You know where her office is in relation to mine, right? So she passes my office all the time. So she saw that. Anyway, blood vessel length. Blood vessel length is directly proportional to the resistance to blood flow through a vessel. So the longer the vessel, the greater the resistance as blood flows through it. So the reason why I have this here is, again, this is something that you guys can relate with. Because when you turn on the faucet, okay, the water coming from the spigot is coming out very forcefully, right? Now you put a hose on it. By the time you reach the other end of the hose, does the force of the water start to, is it just as strong as it was over here?
Mm-hmm.
It isn't as strong because now this is what you're having to do at the end of the hose to increase the pressure, to force blood to go through it a little bit more swiftly, right? More vigorously. Okay, so length of the vessel has a lot to do with it. Short vessel, not a lot of resistance, the force is strong. Longer vessel, you need more force to push the same amount through a greater distance. And this is also caused by friction because as the flow is interacting with more of a surface, the flow will decrease and you need more pressure to move that same amount. So this is where blood vessel radius comes in. The resistance is inversely proportional to the fourth of the radius of the blood vessel. That's going to be on the test. I'm just kidding. You want it to be on the test?
No.
Okay then.
They're not in the mood for your jokes right now.
I know, I can't even have fun with you guys. All right. The smaller the radius of the vessel, the greater the resistance it offers to blood flow. For example, if the radius of the vessel is decreased by 1/2, its resistance to the blood flow increases 16 times. That's where the 4 times comes in. Okay? Yeah. Okay? Because with greater diameters, there's less resistance. With smaller diameters, there's more of the fluid coming in contact with the surface of the inner diameter. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Resistance increases as arteries get smaller,
Mm.
right? Although the aorta is large, pressure remains high because it is close proximity to the heart. So anything that's close to the heart is going to have strong pressure. The further the vessel is from the heart, pressure starts to drop. So for example, pressure drops from 80 to 30 at the arterioles and capillaries, 10 at the capillaries, and then 0 by the time it reaches the vena cava and the right atrium. Okay? So again, the closer it is to the heart, the greater the pressure. The further away, there's a decrease in pressure. And resistance, I should say. Resistance, sorry. Circulation time. Circulation time is the time required for blood to pass from the right atrium through the pulmonary circulation and back to the LV through the systemic circulation down to the foot and back again to the heart. So it's basically from here to here and then back again. That's circulation time. Okay, an average circulation time is 1 minute. All right. You guys, are we okay with unidirectional flow?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so low pressure veins, we have valves to keep one-way direction. Muscle contraction keeps it flowing in one direction. This is also known as milking. I did not make this up. Breathing moves the diaphragm, changing the pressure between the abdominal and also thoracic cavity, allowing for easy movement of the blood through the veins. All right, since we are concerned with veins of the upper limb, that's what we're going to be talking about now. So there are two sets of veins collecting blood from the upper limb. One is superficial, the other is deep. Superficial veins begin as networks of small veins under the skin of the hands. So as technologists, are we going to be dealing with superficial veins or deep veins?
Superficial.
Superficials, okay, so the one that we can see and palpate. These are the most common veins that we deal with that are very superficial, very easy to see in most cases. The first one here is the cephalic vein. The cephalic vein ascends along the anterolateral. What position are we talking about here? What is this called?
Anatomical.
The anatomical position. So anterolateral, that's the thumb side. So cephalic starts on the thumb side. It starts at the anterolateral surface of the forearm and arm, and it joins the axillary vein below the lateral aspect of the clavicle. Cephalic to the subclavian. Why is it called subclavian?
Under the clavicle.
Under the clavicle, okay? So that's your cephalic vein. So it's going to be on your thumb side, right about here. Okay? The next one here is the basilic vein. It ascends along the postural medial. Okay, now we're talking back. Medial is your pinky now. This is your thumb side. This is your pinky side. This is your basilic. So it ascends the postural medial surface of the forearm and wraps around towards the front. So it starts off in the back. And it comes towards the front. Now we're in the front side. It's going to make its way into the medial aspect of the arm. Okay? And it passes up the medial side of the arm to join the brachial and also the axillary vein. Now we're talking about the armpit. Okay? The median antebrachial is the vein that ascends on the anterior surface of the forearm to join with the basilic vein below the elbow. So it's right around here, median cubital. What's another name for this area here? We call it the median antebrachial, but we call it also the cubital. Antecubital is another name for it. Of that area is also known as the antecubital. That's where the cephalic and the basilic and other veins meet and join. Right here, at your elbow.
Your elbow.
This is what we're going to be hitting. Is this
This guy.
area right here.
Hello.
Okay?
Don't forget me. Oh, I like deep veins.
All right, deep veins. Deep veins begin as small veins in the hand The veins accompany arteries that have the same names as arteries. Okay, we've been through that already. Okay, so the ulnar, radial, and brachial arteries each have accompanying veins. We have 2 ulnar veins and 2 radial veins that join to form 2 brachial veins. The 2 brachial veins then form 1 axillary vein, and the axillary vein becomes the subclavian vein. Any questions there?
No.
Okay, so we have 2 ulnar, 2 radials, and it turns into 2 brachials. Okay, the brachial is going to form the axillary, which then turns into the subclavian. Okay? Okay. Okay, now we have a picture of my arm up here. Who's got veins like this? Anybody? Anybody? Nick, don't you have one?
I got some veins.
Oh, you got
Yeah.
some. Yeah, he's got some ropes. Everyone's going to be wanting
Yeah.
hitting that. Wait, he's a daddy now.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, he's a daddy now. So. All right. So this is the area that we're going to stick. It's the most common. Because the other one is hard to see on most people, but it will be prominent around the elbow.
One has a lot of nerves under it.
What's that?
One of them has a lot of nerves under it. You really shouldn't try to do that.
It's
Last
right here.
resort.
This is phallic. This has a lot of, anywhere other than this has a lot of nerves. So if you hit the forearm,
Yeah, but
yeah. Oh, more here?
you shouldn't do it. It should be like literally a last resort, like after you try a hand.
All
You're
right.
gonna mess someone.
No. I'm giggling because Crystal Near,
Yeah, saddleback.
she's a saddleback. She kept volunteering her cephalic vein to get hit.
No, she's crazy.
Yeah.
No one's
She's like, hit that, hit that, hit that.
Damn. Hit it again.
Yeah, so we've hit the cephalic. We've also had some students volunteering their hands and their wrists, just to challenge their friends.
Am I flushing?
You're kind of breaking down.
No.
Yeah, you are.
Okay, maybe sweat,
Yeah, a little bit.
You might have orange juice or something in here.
That's it, guys.
Cool.